And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. The Greek word for war in this text is the word polemos. This is where we get the word polemic. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines the word polemic as 1. An aggressive attack on or refutation of the opinions or principles of another. B. The art or practice of disputation or controversy. 2. An aggressive controversialist, disputant. Satan disputed with God regarding the wisdom of his law of unconditional love, and at the same time he introduced another law, the moral law of reward and punishment, which uses force in order to keep order. When Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they abdicated the dominion of the earth to Satan, and the earth became Satan's jurisdiction of good and evil, reward and punishment. The human race then finds itself in the middle of a spiritual war, the war which Lucifer has been waging against God's moral law of agape love. This is and has always been a war between God's principles, righteousness, and Satan's principles, iniquity. Therefore, there are two spiritual kingdoms, two jurisdictions at play in our world. These two kingdoms are respectively symbolized by the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In order to understand the wrath of God, it is vital that we understand that there are two spiritual and moral jurisdictions in the world. This brings in the issue of choice and freedom, which God infinitely honors and respects. Just as in our physical world, each sovereign nation has its own laws and jurisdictions, so also do God's and Satan's kingdoms have their own law and jurisdiction. God's moral law is the law of unconditional love, impartiality, freedom, in which there is no force, no violence, and no fear. Satan's moral law of good and evil is the law of reward and punishment, which is partial, keeps us in bondage because it uses force, violence, oppression, and fear in order to control us. The Bible addresses these two moral laws as the spirit or the flesh, and our choice is clearly shown in the following verse. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. It is vitally important that we understand that he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, and he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. God's sovereign principle of reaping what you sow was laid out on Creation Week, when He created everything according to its kind. We still see this principle in the world, where every seed bears its own fruit, and what we sow is what we reap. Therefore, if we sow in Satan's jurisdiction, from his own jurisdiction we will reap destruction. But if we sow to God's jurisdiction, from God's jurisdiction we will reap everlasting life. We are warned not to deceive ourselves and mock God, that is, not to take this lightly, because there's a principle involved here that not even God can break, and that's the principle of freedom. Freedom is an inherent component of God's moral law of unconditional love, and He must honor our choices and their consequences, because He cannot break His eternal principle of love. This principle is urgently emphasized in Jude 6. And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, He has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. This means that even the angels could not escape this principle. What this means for us in a practical sense is that if we operate in our own lives by the unmerciful principle of reward and punishment, we will be subject to the punishment inherent in Satan's jurisdiction of reward and punishment. But if we live by the Spirit of God, extending grace, love, and mercy to our neighbors, we will reap the inherent consequences of God's jurisdiction, which is life. Just as an apple tree cannot produce pears, or a cow give birth to a kitten, neither can God use reward and punishment, or Satan use unconditional love. Their respective kingdoms are distinct and separate from each other.